mysterious black substance has been dormant in the town for decades, but unexpectedly awakens suddenly and crazily slaughters humans. They infiltrate everywhere and spread rapidly like a virus. A man and a woman are forced into a desperate situation and can only wait for death, however, the next second. Why exactly did this abnormal phenomenon occur? And what exactly is this black substance? Without further ado, let's start the story. Hank, a football player, was in the spotlight throughout high school, and even won the heart of a beauty. Late at night, he took his cheerleading squad girlfriend Tacy to share intimate moments in the car. Just how affectionate could the two of them get afterward? Whether they were eating, sleeping, or even going to the bathroom, they never missed a chance to share passionate kisses. Originally, Hank thought he would live happily with Tacy forever, but the appearance of another man changed everything. One day, Tacy went to find Hank, explained the situation, said she had fallen in love with someone else, and proposed a peaceful breakup. This incident dealt a heavy blow to Hank, so much so that in the subsequent football game, he was completely off his game. His teammate passed the ball to him, but he looked toward the stands instead, and was shocked to see Tacy passionately kissing her current boyfriend. Hank froze on the spot instantly, not knowing what to do, and failed to notice that something had wrapped around his foot. When Hank woke up again, he learned that his lower leg was severely injured, and he would have to walk with a limp for the rest of his life. This meant he could never play football again. But he couldn't go on moping around forever, so Hank got a job as a cashier at a supermarket. Unexpectedly, he ran into Tacy and her current boyfriend Jason. The two bought a box of condoms. This really hurt Hank deeply. Later, time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, more than a decade passed. The black substance that had tripped Hank back then spread wildly, but aside from being ugly, it didn't have any impact on the town, so people just let it grow unchecked. Over these more than 10 years, Hank never dated anyone again and lived with his father, but unfortunately, his father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. After going through the ups and downs of life and losing his beloved one, Hank felt that life was really hard. So he went alone to the top of the mountain to drown his sorrows in alcohol. But no matter what, life had to go on. The next day, Hank, who worked as a janitor at a school, went to work as usual. By accident, he found that the trophies he had won from past football games were still displayed by the school in a showcase. This gave him great encouragement, so through his own efforts, he became a science teacher. In class, he taught his students about bacteria and microorganisms. First, Hank gave each student a petri dish and asked them to spit saliva on it for research. But, just then, a girl named Grace raised a question, why they weren't studying that disgusting substance. This question stumped Hank, because humans have done very little research on it. No one knew if it had fallen from a meteorite or escaped from some laboratory, but it didn't affect humans' normal lives, so the two coexisted peacefully. After school, Hank went to the bar his father had left him. Jason wanted to make a deal with him to buy the bar. It was unclear if Jason was deliberately provoking him. Jason could have come alone, but he insisted on bringing his wife and kids. As they talked, the conversation turned to Grace's zodiac sign. Tacy said Grace was a Capricorn. Hank was shocked by this and asked, wasn't she a Pisces? This made Hank recall what had happened more than a decade ago. By calculating Tacy's pregnancy timeline, he suspected that Grace might well be his daughter. Coincidentally, he had collected the students' saliva in the previous class, so Hank decided to find time to get a paternity test. On the other side, Grace had a fight with her father. Unable to swallow her anger, she snuck her father's golf club while he was asleep, ran to the yard, and took her frustration out on the gross substance. She smashed the sticky mass several times until she had vented all her anger, then left contentedly, completely oblivious that the once motionless gross substance had started moving. At the same time, Hank was about to enjoy his dinner, when he was shocked to find that the gross substance had somehow appeared behind his head. It was so close that it almost cost him his life, so Hank angrily tore it off and threw it outside the house. But how had this thing gotten inside the house? To figure out what was going on, Hank took a piece, put it in a glass jar, and observed it. He finally summed up the rule. The gross substance moves wildly, but stops moving as soon as it's exposed to ultraviolet light. The scene shifts. Someone, desperate to go viral, even licked the gross substance without caring about their safety. It was really disgusting. On the other side, ever since Hank suspected Grace was his daughter, he couldn't help but pay attention to her, and wanted to help her fulfill her dream of joining a band, only to be called an old man by Grace's boyfriend Alan, and even mistaken for a pedophile pervert by the teacher who had a crush on him. The teacher slapped him across the face. Hank was heartbroken and could only go to the mountain to drown his sorrows in alcohol. It wasn't until his mood cleared up that he finally went home, determined to face the rest of his life well. Hank decided to renovate his father's bar, but just after he hung up the decorative lights, someone walked in. Hank said, "The bar isn't open yet, and we don't have many kinds of alcohol right now." But the man sat down at the bar as if he hadn't heard a word, and asked for a glass of whiskey. Hank found it strange but still served him a drink as requested. The man drank it all in one go and signaled for another. Hank carefully poured another glass and handed it to him. Unexpectedly, the man spat out a mouthful of thick black substance. Hank was so scared that he hurriedly took out his phone to call the police, only to see an extremely horrifying sight. The man actually swallowed a cat hole with tentacles protruding from his mouth. Only then did Hank clearly see the man's ferocious and terrifying face. He was completely a monster. Terrified, Hank scampered around, grabbed a hammer, and smashed wildly at the creature's tentacles. Hank realized the man had been infected by the gross substance, so he grabbed everything within reach for self-defense. The things he grabbed at first were completely useless, until he picked up the decorative light on the wall to block the tentacles. The creature's tentacles burst into flames the moment they came into contact with the decorative light. The man howled in pain from the burns and then fled the bar in a panic. Out of danger, Hank let out a long sigh of relief. He glanced nervously at the decorative light that had saved his life, and was shocked to find not a single burn mark on it. Shortly after, the police responded to the call and arrived at the bar. Hank hurriedly explained the situation, saying that a monster had stretched out tentacles and eaten a cat. Hardly had he finished speaking, when Hank saw the police pick up the gross substance from the ground, and told him that this thing was harmless. Hank was instantly stunned, because the faces of the two policemen were covered with terrifying black spots. Obviously, they had also been infected by the gross substance. Most outrageous of all, they actually invited Hank to a party at Alan's house, but before that, they needed to modify Hank. Realizing the policemen were going to infect him, Hank pretended to know nothing and tried to slip away quietly. However, the policeman didn't want to let him go. They opened the police car door and told him to look inside. After seeing that there was also an infected person inside, Hank's heart sank completely. But just then, the policeman pushed him into the police car. In the critical moment, Hank used something to smash the window, jumped out of the police car, and then rushed to his own car as fast as he could. After starting the car, he tried to step hard on the accelerator to drive away from the scene, but the car broke down at the worst possible moment and just stayed stuck in place. The two policemen laughed like pigs. They had thought the prey they thought was in the bag would get away, only to realize it was just a little trick played on them. They excitedly banged on Hank's windshield and even pulled out their guns. Everyone thought Hank would meet his end right there. Fortunately, the car started up at this moment. On the run, Hank remembered the policemen saying they were going to the party held by Alan, and realized the students would definitely be in danger. Most importantly, Grace, who was Alan's girlfriend, must be there too. Not wanting her to get hurt, Hank hurried to call Grace. He said anxiously, "Some policemen are going to the party. It's very dangerous there. Find a way to leave quickly." He also confessed that the reason he was saying all this was because he thought he might be Grace's biological father, and he didn't want his daughter to get hurt. But what no one expected was that it was Tacy who answered the phone. She angrily warned Hank not to talk nonsense, saying, "We only had that one time together. Don't be delusional about taking someone else's daughter." Then Tacy said a lot more nasty things before hanging up the phone without mercy. Hank felt utterly helpless, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it at the moment, because the two policemen from earlier had already caught up. Hank's car couldn't outrun the police car in the first place, and to make matters worse, the gross substance in the middle of the road wrapped around his wheels. As the police car was about to crash into him, Hank suddenly channeled his inner racing driver and reversed the car, then temporarily escaped danger with agile maneuvering. This move made the two policemen grind their back teeth in anger. They continued to step hard on the accelerator to chase Hank, never expecting him to suddenly swerve sharply. One of the policemen was thrown out of the police car and suffered fractures all over his body, but strangely enough, even with a broken neck, he still wasn't dead. The scene shifts. Hank drove to Alan's house. He shouted, "The gross substance is killing people. Hurry up and escape now." These words sounded extremely absurd to everyone at the party, and they thought Hank was probably drunk. Hank ignored them, grabbed Grace and tried to leave, but was stopped by Alan, who mocked Hank for being a pervert, saying he had slept with Grace's mother before, and now even had the audacity to try to sleep with her daughter. As he spoke, he tried to take his girlfriend away. Hank continued to beg Grace to go with him, but was scolded by her, and the rest of the people at the party also joined in the scolding, making Hank feel so embarrassed that he turned around and left. Shortly after he left, Alan tried to take the opportunity to get intimate with Grace, but she refused. Grace ran to the second bedroom to calm herself down. She was fine. But Alan couldn't stand the loneliness and tricked another girl into sleeping with him. At the same time, a guy watched Alan hook up with a girl and felt resentful, so he ran to the bathroom to fix his appearance, thinking that he must hook up with a girl tonight no matter what. While admiring his own handsome face, the light above his head started flickering non-stop, and something strange also happened with the sink. The guy nervously reached his hand into the sink, only to find that just a clump of hair had blocked the drain. Just as he let out a sigh of relief, a sticky clump of the gross substance fell on his face. The guy immediately looked up in terror. At this moment, a guy was swimming in the swimming pool in the yard. Suddenly, something violently dragged him into the water. The girls by the poolside thought he was playing a prank, so no one wanted to pay attention to him. Little did they know that the moment the guy was dragged into the pool, countless clumps of the gross substance spread rapidly. The people in the pool were instantly caught in trouble, and the scene was thrown into chaos. However, Hank hadn't gone far. Hearing the constant screams, he realized something must have happened and hurried back quickly. On the other side, a girl was on the phone in the bathroom. She had no idea what was happening outside. When she saw the curtain moving, she angrily told her best friend on the other end of the line that she would bring this perverted peeping Tom to justice tonight. The gross substance attacked the partygoers wildly and turned the party into a living hell. Everyone picked up walks and everything usable to fight back. However, the result was unsatisfactory. More and more people were violently crushed into pulp by the gross substance. They ruthlessly devoured all living things like a virus. At this moment, Alan was still getting intimate with the girl, but he always felt something was wrong with the feel, and couldn't figure out why her body was so sticky. Suddenly, an abnormal sound came from behind, and Alan was so scared that he quickly turned around. At the same time, Grace, who was asleep, was woken up by strange noises. When she opened her eyes, she was instantly shocked. She quickly used the quilt to block the oncoming gross substance, but the quilt wouldn't hold for long. Just as she was about to die, Hank rushed in to the rescue just in time. He planned to take Grace and escape, but they hit the jackpot right after opening the door. Scared, Hank had to close the door again. By this time, the outside was in utter chaos, yet a boy was still thinking about apologizing to his girlfriend. No sooner had he said the apology than she kissed him fiercely, and the boy was infected too. This was simply throwing his life away for nothing. On the other side, even though Hank and Grace were hiding in the room, the gross substance seeped into the room through every crack, ready to swallow them both whole. Grace hugged Hank in fear, thinking they would die together in the next second. Ultraviolet lights turned on outside. The gross substance was burned and turned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Looking outside, they were surprised to see that it was military personnel who had arrived. But their goal was clear: to find and protect the mayor so he could leave. It could be said that everyone had benefited from the mayor. In the end, all the adults in the town were summoned by the military to a large supermarket for a meeting. The female officer explained the situation to everyone, stating that the current transportation capacity was limited, and they could only escort the mayor to evacuation, and then head to Vicksburg to protect the hydroelectric dam. However, the military wouldn't abandon the remaining people. They would leave a team to reinforce the building they were in. The supplies inside could sustain everyone for a long time. At this point, someone asked about the current situation. The female officer said that after decades of dormancy, the gross substance had entered the active phase, and this active period was expected to last 4 to 8 years, before it would go dormant again. When everyone heard they would have to stay in the supermarket for several years, they became indignant and demanded that senior government officials come out to speak. The female officer helplessly said that the government couldn't help everyone, as resources were really insufficient now, and if they wanted to survive, they could only seal the supermarket's doors, windows, and cracks tightly, and block all the sewers and vents as well, and must remember never to go outside. However, upon hearing this, Tacy shouted that it was impossible, claiming it was far too inhumane, saying her daughter had a dance competition to become prom queen the next day. When the others heard this, they also started complaining that they had things to take care of at home. The female officer shouted that she didn't want to deprive anyone of their rights, saying her own children had been killed the day before, and she just didn't want the tragedy to repeat itself. Everyone had mostly calmed down, but Jason insisted on going up to speak. After his passionate speech, everyone completely refused to stay in the supermarket and insisted on leaving no matter what. In the end, everyone, except Hank, ran away. You can't reason with those who are determined to court death. The female officer didn't bother wasting more time here, and was ready to take her men and leave. Suddenly, Hank stopped her. He introduced himself as a science teacher, and wanted to share his views on the gross substance. He stated that the gross substance is currently going through 3 phases, namely growth, energy metabolism, and photosynthesis. This means it has to hibernate, and we can use this to kill it. The gross substance is a eukaryote that absorbs ultraviolet rays, and converts them into chemical energy, but it can't absorb and convert them simultaneously. This explains why it can only grow in the dark, and can only remain motionless during the day. After talking for a while, Hank finally drew the conclusion that the gross substance could be killed by using ultraviolet rays at night. The female officer was very excited after hearing this, and called the president to explain the situation to him. The president laughed out loud after hearing this, and said he had long known that the gross substance is afraid of ultraviolet rays. However, the country has a limited number of UV light bulbs, and all the existing inventory has been transported to Nicholsburg. This is the reality. After dawn, the gross substance stopped moving. Everyone went for a walk on the street as if nothing had happened, but many people seem to have lost their minds, thinking that the gross substance can release intestinal probiotics and boost their own and their baby's immunity. Even TV hosts started talking nonsense, claiming that the gross substance could make them last longer, and if you don't believe it, he could pull down his pants to prove it. At this time, in order to get through the night crisis, Hank gathered the school teachers to discuss countermeasures together with everyone, but one person suddenly stood up and took off their clothes.
No peace! No bliss! Suckle upon me!
Unexpectedly, the other teachers actually all gathered around. It was absolutely outrageous. The scene shifts. Alan drove Grace to the suburbs. With dusk approaching, Grace hoped to hurry home to take shelter, but Alan started making physical advances to get intimate with her. Grace was so scared that she hurriedly grabbed her pepper spray. Just at this moment, Hank showed up and angrily yanked Alan out of the car. Grace got into Hank's car right away. Alan tried to argue, but only got a face full of exhaust fumes, and on the way to taking Grace home, Hank said he thought Alan had been infected. Just as they were talking, the car suddenly lost control. Hank shouted, "There's something in the engine." And just like that, Hank and Grace were trapped in the car. Grace hurried to send a distress message to her cousin, then started rummaging around the car casually, and accidentally found the paternity test sample. At first, Grace thought it was funny, but when she saw the photo of Tacy and Hank tucked in the rearview mirror, she couldn't laugh anymore in an instant, unable to believe that Hank might well be her father. Although she didn't get along with Jason, she didn't want another biological father to suddenly appear either. She was about to lash out at him, when suddenly the gross substance launched a fierce attack on the car, and by accident, it righted the vehicle. Then they launched an even more terrifying attack. Hank quickly held up the expired food containing penicillin, and explained to Grace that this was poison to the gross substance. But there wasn't much penicillin after all. Hank could only cooperate with Grace to keep burning the surrounding gross substance with a flamethrower. Just then, Grace's cousin arrived. Grace picked up the paternity test sample, and when her cousin turned on the ultraviolet light, she ran to his car together with Hank. After staying up until dawn, Hank went to the bar in a daze, only to see his father who had long passed away. His father said he wasn't dead, but had been sucked underground, then talked for a while, saying that the gross substance could cure Hank's leg, and even reached out his hand to him. Hank wanted to respond, but he quickly came to his senses, and set fire to the figure along with the entire bar, burning them to ashes. On the other side, Grace sent the sample out, then got into Alan's car, and Alan apologized for his impulsiveness the night before. Grace didn't say anything. At the same time, Hank asked Tacy to meet him on the playground, because Grace had said the night before that her mother was getting a divorce from Jason, so Hank wanted to ask if he had a chance to rekindle their past relationship, but Tacy said it was impossible.
You know, actually... These are so exotic!
At night, Hank blamed himself entirely for Tacy's death. He went to the top of the mountain to take a leap of faith, only to be caught by a suicide prevention net. He turned around and realized it was Jason's public service advertisement. Hank was absolutely furious. But Jason actually did a good job with this. He even prepared music for people who were feeling desperate. After listening to the music, Hank actually no longer wanted to die. He was determined to do his best to save everyone. He rummaged through his house to find all the ultraviolet lights. After arriving on the street, he saw Jason, who had no sense of crisis at all. He persuaded Jason to hurry home and take shelter, but Jason didn't appreciate it, saying the gross substance was everywhere and there was nothing to be afraid of. But soon after he finished speaking, he was surrounded by the gross substance. Hank wanted to use the ultraviolet lights to save him, but the windshield of Jason's Mercedes-Benz was UV resistant, and the car windows were even bulletproof. At the same time, Grace and Alan went to a bar to hang out. Someone asked anxiously whether they should close the door, in case the gross substance gets in. However, the others all said there was no need to worry. The gross substance has been evolving, and maybe later it will even transform humans to be stronger. But it wasn't long before the gross substance launched a surprise attack on the bar. The scene immediately turned into a bloody slaughterhouse. At this moment, an old man was hiding in the bathroom peeking at girls, suddenly heard a strange noise coming from outside. Out of curiosity, he clung to the partition to take a look. On the other side, Hank went to the bar and searched for a long time before finally finding Grace. He saw that she was in the same room as Alan, and was relieved to find that both of them still had their clothes on properly. The weight in his heart was instantly lifted. He took Grace and prepared to walk through the overrun corridor, but after taking just a few steps, they were stopped by the infected Alan. Alan sprayed water at Hank, and all the UV lights were ruined. Alan proudly picked up a hammer and kept approaching Grace. In the critical moment, Hank picked up a chainsaw and brutally shredded Alan's internal organs. He thought Alan wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble, but never expected Alan to have such a tenacious will to live. Hank had to blow Alan's head off, then turned on a cutter and chopped Alan into minced meat. In the time that followed, Hank finally got a chance to sit down and talk calmly with Grace, but just then, 2 other students fell from the ceiling. After confirming they weren't infected, Hank suggested that everyone go to the stadium to turn on the halogen lights there, since those lights produce a small amount of ultraviolet rays. The group then took action immediately, but when they reached the control room, they found that the wires had been deliberately damaged. Hank told the students to reconnect the wires, while he would go to turn on the circuit breaker, otherwise the halogen lights would have no power at all. After hearing this, Grace hugged Hank tightly and begged him to come back safely. Deeply moved, Hank limped and ran outside, but halfway there, a huge clump of the gross substance burst out from under the playground. At the same time, Grace and the others had already reconnected the wires, and were about to check if Hank had finished his task. Suddenly Tacy and Jason walked in, saying that a family of 3 should be reunited. The classmate launched an attack on them. At this moment, Hank was blocked by the giant monster and didn't know what to do. He picked up a football, so he threw it hard at the circuit breaker switch. The next second, the halogen light suddenly turned on brightly. All the gross substance was frozen in place on the spot. Everyone else, hiding in the school, all came to the playground. As long as they could hold on until dawn, everyone would be safe. But they hadn't felt relieved for long. The gross substance underground, which wasn't affected by ultraviolet rays, started causing damage. The playground was plunged into darkness again. Everyone was so scared that they hurried to climb to higher ground. Countless people were brutally devoured by the tentacles of the gross substance. Grace and the other 2 managed to climb to the very top safely. Grace looked down with a worried expression, and Hank shouted, "No matter who you are, please stay alive." Then she used all her strength to pull the other person up. Meanwhile, the gross substance below tried to chase after them, but let out a painful howl the moment it touched the sunlight, then became immobile. Everyone celebrated excitedly that they had survived. But before they could be happy for 2 seconds, a dark cloud covered the sun, and the gross substance regained its vitality. Hank quickly hugged Grace, and said that whether they were biological father and daughter or not, he was proud of her. Then the group just let the gross substance climb onto their bodies, but suddenly the sun came out again. It was really a thrill ride. Not only that, the government finally came to rescue them with supplies, and finally eliminated all of the gross substance. The scene shifts, and Hank receives the paternity test report. Grace looked on with anticipation, and the moment the report was opened, the expressions of both of them were intriguing. Were they biological father and daughter after all? The movie ends here. As expected, the movie lives up to its name. Countless high-octane scenes are really disgusting enough. It has a strong visual impact. It can be seen that the budget was probably quite high, but the plot and pacing have major flaws. Among them, the male lead Brandon played Superman in the 2006 DC movie Superman Returns, a role that is the white moonlight in the hearts of countless people. Many people sighed with relief that he finally had a new movie coming out, but many others think Brandon has fallen on hard times for even taking on a movie like this. What do you think about this? Today's commentary ends here. If you like my commentary, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is my greatest encouragement. See you next time.